So we're going to talk for about like 20-ish minutes, then we're going to open it up right up to the audience, and you guys can just ask whatever you want. It'll be 99% My Bloody Valentine, except for 1% I wanted to ask was, do you have a 35mm print of Pickup Summer? And if you do, can we watch it sometime?
Oh, yeah.
No, I don't.
No.
You don't?
George has it.
Check. Martin, can we get this one louder? Check. Okay, you take that one. That's a better one.
No, I don't, unfortunately, but I do have a DVD of it.
Yeah.
Ooh, well, we can hang out and watch that.
Yeah.
Like, how many people here worked on Pickup Summer? Because I know there's, which is pretty cool. Pinball. Did it have two names? Yeah, okay.
The original title was Pinball Summer. The Americans decided to call it Pickup Summer.
I know I've seen 2 posters of it at least.
Yeah.
So like really the big thing for me of like looking at the movie and what I always wanted to ask was just the idea of like of Cape Breton not only being the thing that ended up getting picked to make the movie, but like just the idea that it's like one of the greatest slasher movies of all time. So the idea that it was Cape Breton is pretty amazing to me because the comparisons there's not much else. So like, how did that come about? Like, and especially like it being your second movie.
Well, the fact that it was my second movie was actually a surprise to me because I wasn't supposed to be making this movie. Bob and I were actually working on a comedy. And we were working on a comedy. What happened was after Bob and I made Pinball Summer, and the producers of Bloody Valentine Cinepix, who make meatballs, and we're doing a lot of good business on comedies, saw Pinball Summer, and Pinball Summer did very, very good business all over the drive-in market. It was seriously big business, and it got sold in France and Europe, all over the place. And Cinepix liked making money. So they thought, well, this kid can make comedies, he works well with Bobpresner, so why don't we get them all together and we'll make a movie with them. So they offered me a 2-picture deal. And I said, oh my God, I was like 27 at the time. And I said, okay, sure, why not? So we started working on this comedy. And in my previous life, I was an English teacher. I knew a lot of English professors and comic writers, some of them from the National Lampoon. So I connected with a few of those people, and we started working on a script called Stitches, which was a hospital parody comedy. And unfortunately, what happened was the writer ended up just getting a little too enthusiastic, and with the help of a little bit too much Peruvian marching powder, wrote a 787-page script or something. Wow. Yeah, I mean, the fucking thing was about this thing. And John Dunning looked at it and said, I'm not going to be able to finish reading this before we're supposed to finish shooting this. So how would you like to do your second movie first? And I said, yeah, sure, I just wanted to make a movie. So he pulled out a 1-page concept by a guy called Stephen Miller, who used to run not the Rialto,
The Red Theater on Sherbrooke.
not on Sherbrooke, on St. Catherine. No.
Cinema 5?
No. Anybody?
It was 42 years ago.
Yeah. The Seville, the Seville Theater. And it was the treatment or the concept for Bloody Valentine. And I read it and I said, sounds great, but I've never made a horror movie before. And John Dunning looked at me and said, well, you never made a comedy before you made a comedy. And I said, well, you're right on that. So I talked to Bob. Bob said, sure, we all wanted to work, So it was set in a coal mine and all of that. So John Dunning hired a very talented young man called John Baird from Los Angeles, and he came up to write the screenplay. And so John Baird and I sat around a little bit and worked a little bit of the story until we had some sort of an outline of some sort and then John Dunning said, okay, well, Bob and George go now and find locations and prep this movie because we got to make it happen now. And we said, well, what? And they said, well, this is sometime in, I guess, July. And said, well, because we got to make this movie and it's got to be in the theaters for February. So Bob and I went down to Nova Scotia and we scouted locations because that was the only place that they had working coal mines in Canada. And we found this one in Sydney Mines, which was just decommissioned. Everything was still there. Most of the things worked. I mean, the elevators worked, the rail cars worked, the lighting system worked, the ventilation system worked. So we came back with pictures and explaining what we can do. John Baird took that and developed a screenplay. During this time, we cast. Bob hired a very superb production designer, Patty Hadfield.
And it seems like you brought over as many people as you could from the last movie.
Well, yeah, and then with the casting, one of the things was, I mean, Bob and I were with Pinball Summer right from the top, and we're both very loyal kind of people. So the people that we loved working with, we thought, why not? So Tomkovacs.
Stand up, please, Tom.
Tomkovacs was on pinball. Robstein was on pinball. Helene Udy was on pinball. The actor Dave, Carl Marat, he was in pinball.
Gotta get his face boiled off.
But yeah.
I really want to watch pinball sometime. So if
So-
anybody has a print, let us know.
So we did the casting, and then we ended up going to Nova Scotia to shoot. And then, of course, the roller coaster of craziness that happens when you're actually trying to shoot in a real fucking mine. Which we had no idea until, one of the things was obviously they wanted this movie, Sydney Mines wanted the movie, so they neglected to tell us a couple of little things like, you can't bring lights down there. So we said, well, how are we going to shoot this? Well, they said, you can use the Bale bulbs, and there were these safety bulbs, 25-watt safety bulbs, is all we had, and there was these 25-watt film lights called Inkies that we could use, and that was all we could use in there. So we ended up having to go through a lot of pain in finding Bob again. Magically ended up, I think, was it Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon's lenses. That's why we ended up having to shoot with Panavision. Nobody wanted to shoot with Panavision because it was more expensive than anything else. But those lenses only fit Panavision. Then we had to send that negative, because even then the film stock, even the faceted film stock at that time with the lights we had wasn't good enough. So it had to be in a laboratory, it had to be pushed by one stop. That film stock was unpushable except for one special treatment called Chemtone, which was only in New York City. So basically what happened is we would send our negatives to Montreal. Montreal would send it to New York City. New York City would then develop those negatives, send the developed negatives back to Montreal. They would make a print of it, and we would get to see it a week after. So it wasn't the rushes, it was the slows. So basically, we shot this whole movie blind. You know, we had no idea. You know, every time the rushes would come in, we'd all go, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then
It really
we
does
go
look
out,
amazing.
and then we go out and say, wow, it worked. You know.
Yeah, there's not like I'm probably biased on this, but like I feel like there's like when you look at the history of like different horrors and different slashers, and especially slashers at that time, of like there's not a slasher movie that looks this good. Like it looks so incredible, and especially the fact that of all the problems that you had and the situations that you were in, of like that it did, like with the talent of everybody, that it does look and holds up.
Well, we had a very talented young director of photography called Rodney Gibbons, who also shot Pinball Summer. And we had another very talented young camera DOP called Peter Bennison, who's somewhere in the audience here, and he should be up anyway.
Peter Bennison.
Peter Bennison, get your ass up here.
You can sit on the stage.
So between
Bring out chairs. I really did have to bring
yeah,
out chairs.
yeah, between Peter Bennison and Rodney Gibbons, that really helped. The fact that we had Penny Hadfield doing the production design really helped. And obviously, you know, like it or not, that mine is photogenic. You know, that little town is photogenic. You know, the characters are all photogenic in their own way, and they're all very different and unique in their own way.
Before we get into like the actual shooting of the movie, the thing I wanted to ask just the cast was that I had heard that like the 2 weeks before the shooting was going to start, that everyone just came and hung out in Cape Breton, or I guess some version of that.
Most people,
Yeah,
but not everyone.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the main cast came. The main cast came. The boys, the miners were all there because we actually made them go down into the mine and hang out with miners and learn to be miners. So that also helped because they're authentic. You know, they're very authentic in that.
Well, that's the great thing about the movie is that it is like one of the best portrayals of like a friendship in a horror movie I've ever seen. Because there's so many horror movies that you watch and you do not care who's gonna die because they're just like phoning it in, or the relationships you can't take seriously or whatever. But the movie of like, I even forget and also get disappointed every time somebody dies. Because like, I don't want them to be gone and for it to be over. But I really feel like that does show of like at least the kind of like the people that did get together for that. That probably did help a lot.
Well, you know, I mean, there was one of the things that both Bob and I were very conscious of when we were casting is that we knew we needed chemistry. We knew we needed people who will like each other and be able to work together because we knew how difficult it was going to be. So, I mean, look, the fact that we're all still dear friends after all these years, you know, the fact that every time we see each other, we haven't seen each other in about 4 years now because of COVID and all of that, but the minute we walk into a room, it's like we picked up where we left off 42 years ago. So, you know, I mean, I think that is probably one of the reasons why the film has that staying power.
Yeah, absolutely. And like it's, you know, especially like, well, a big thing like to jump around a bit is the fact that like seeing this cut is so amazing. Of like it's nearly 9 minutes, a difference, which is like so offensive to me to consider that somebody sat around and was like, let's get rid of 9 minutes of the coolest, weirdest stuff in this movie.
There's still about 4 or 5 minutes missing.
Yeah. But as you said, right, it's not that's not coming back.
Never.
But yeah, I guess like I'm sure a big thing that people want to talk about too is like all the amazing effects and stunts and the different like everybody's deaths, everybody does. But like yeah, just so you know, like a few things on that. Oh yeah.
And the best stuntman, stand up.
Stand up.
There we go. Yeah.
The best stuntman.
Dwayne McClain, everybody. Yeah, he devised all those stunts. He coordinated them,
Every
And-
car swerve.
and he made them look good.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, he was Mr. Fishtail, yes.
Yeah, I heard a thing about like the Helen near death of like the lift. Like I don't want to give away too much for what's that? Helene, sorry, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, for the like the whole setup of that, I've heard some pretty cool things about that. If you wanted to talk about it, do you want to?
I don't know, what do you want?
Oh, just
Well,
like
George knows more about it than I do. I
wanna
was just
hear
in
from
it.
you.
What do you want to hear? What do you want to do?
yeah, just like I mean, I have an idea of how they did it, and
Yeah.
like I mean, like the whole like the lift. I love it. Like every time I see it, it's so intense.
Yeah.
And crazy, but like how they actually did that whole like carrying you around.
Yeah, George has got to help me on this, but I kind of remember that we were on a wheeling platform, were we?
Yeah.
And, oh gosh, was Peter wearing a harness? How did he carry me? I don't remember, I was too busy screaming.
I heard it was like a stirrup, like for a
Yeah.
horse.
Yeah.
Like that it was
Yeah, it
like
was
on the
something like
legs,
that. I
and you
remember
put your
that.
feet into it.
That's right,
Yeah.
see, he knows more about it than I
I
do.
didn't want to tell your story.
No, it's all right, you can
Yeah.
tell my story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just the
yeah,
actor, I just did as I'm told.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't pay much attention to anything. So.
And the whole thing was on a rolling platform.
Yeah, that's all.
I know you have a cool fact about your life mold though for your face.
Yes, what about that? The life mold?
Yeah, like if you want to tell about. how
Oh,
happened.
that is a cool story. Let's see.
Trip to LA.
It was a trip to LA, and the guys were very famous. Can't remember their names, but they did. They'd just done the mold for David Bowie's "Man Who Felt Earth" the day previous, and I was mildly claustrophobic, but they were so good at just keeping my attention. I was a big David Bowie fan. That had a lot to do with it. And they just like plaster your whole face, and you just sort of have to stand very still. And I just remember them telling me some David Bowie stories, one of which was that he didn't like to bathe much. That fascinated me for a good long time. That was really fun. That was my first trip to LA. I think I took it with John Beard. I kind of remember being able to.
Yeah, yeah.
It was really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, and like so, I mean, with that, the horror stuff in mind, like the whole runaround of the MPAA, right? Like that was who was butchering it.
Yeah.
Like when you finish the movie and show, like that whole process sounds kind of maddening.
Well, it was first it was mad because by the time we got back from Nova Scotia, when it was must have been mid-October,
Early November.
early November. Yeah, that's why some of those scenes they're cold, you know. So it was early November. We had to have this film ready, fully finished by January 23rd, I believe it was, because they needed 3 weeks to create all the work prints, the 1,200 work prints that were going and being shipped to theaters all across North America. So that didn't give us a lot of time to edit the film and to do the mix and to do the composition of the music and so on. So we were working night and day. We had 2 editors working. At one point, a 3rd editor came in, so there was like shifts. So, you know, and I'd be just going in, you know, go in for a couple of hours with one editor, see what was going on, then go home, take a nap, go back to the other editor, and it was just going on like that. And so we finally got it, and we were working in Toronto at the Grimaldi studio, who were the fabulous sound mixers in the country at the time, and they're the only ones who had the size of studio necessary, because we had something like 140 tracks of sound or something crazy on us on this. And we sent a finished work print, excuse me, to the MPAA with our editor, Rick Wallace, to to get the MPAA rating and everything else while we're mixing and while we're cutting the negative at the same time. And I remember Rick calling and saying, we have a problem, you know. And from then, for the next, I think, 5 days, we had nothing but, can you cut out 5 frames of this? Can you cut out 10 frames of this? So basically, we died the death of 1,000 cuts. And, you know, and each time we have to go back and obviously recut the master mix masters, recut the negatives one more time. And that is one of the reasons why it was so difficult to find most of the footage, because as the negatives were being cut, when you cut a negative, it's not like editing video. You lose a frame. Every time that you recut a negative, you end up losing a frame on either side. So at one point, literally, they'd say, okay, take out 2 more cuts. Take out 2 more cuts. To the point where at one of the cuts, I can't remember which one, I said, well, there's nothing left. That's just a sound effect you're hearing and is bothering you to take out more. So basically, the situation was the MPAA told us that, you know, it's either that or it's going X-rated. If it was going to go X-rated, it meant we would have been in a couple of 100 porno theaters across North America, which would have been not a very good economic decision by Paramount or by our producers. So, and there was no time to fight the MPAA. So basically, Paramount caved, and what the 35 millimeter print of this film is what went out, you know, where basically I used to call it my anemic Valentine.
Last thing on that is just like, so when, for this cut that we did just watch, like, modernly, like, I guess it was not even 10 years ago that this got put together, right?
This cut was put together about 3 years ago. I think.
Oh, wow.
3 or 4 years ago by Shout Factory.
And do you know how, like, they got a hold of the stuff that was just gone?
But basically what happened was twice, Cinepix was sold to Lionsgate.
Shut up your phone.
So the Cinepix library was sold to Lionsgate. Cinepix was a major distribution company in Canada, along with producing films. They had warehouses, and as these warehouses were being cleaned out, somebody would find some dusty locker on a shelf in the back, a couple of rolls of something that they'd look at, and it was, hey, this is a piece of My Bloody Valentine work print, and this is another piece of My Bloody Valentine work print. So all that stuff, the new stuff in there, has been remastered, digitally remastered from work print. Wow. Scratched, gouged, bleached out old work print.
I can't, like, I don't know, but yeah, I mean, sure, let's go. I do notice it, like, I might be wrong, but I remember seeing a version with the new material where, like, it's almost like the color timing changes every time you go to the work print.
Yeah, well, that was the version that Lionsgate put out just before the remake.
Oh.
And the remastering technology was not as state of the art as it is now, and only about half of what you saw today was in that version.
Oh, okay.
That was the first find of these work prints, and they just could not master it. And they tried, and we were talking about it, and I was talking to them about it. And at one point, we all just decided that, you know what, it'll never match. it'll just look like really shitty color timing. So why don't we just leave it rough? So at least the fans will know what's the new stuff being put in, as opposed to just making it look bad. So that's what the decision was, to do it that way.
Seeing this one now, it's like, it is really hard to tell what is or isn't from the work print. It looks so good. But there is a funny thing about that older version of, I found whenever you get to the kills, it's almost like it goes into like a kill cam of like where it like shifts and it's like, oh, somebody's fucked. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what we kind of figured, you know. So we said it works, and at least this way, you know, it didn't, you know. My feeling about making movies has always been, you know, make it look like you meant it, you know. So, and it was easier to make it look like we meant it by leaving it shitty than it was, you know, than trying to make it look good when we knew we couldn't.
So I think we'll open it up to some questions now, if that sounds good. Who's got a hand? Somebody, raise a hand if you want. There, you, in the back, just scream it.
I've always wondered about the product placement. Moosehead, were you sponsored?
Fuck no, I'll let Bob speak to that, though.
So there's a tradition in the film business, which is that at wrap, you break out.
Used to be, can't do that anymore, God forbid.
I started in 1851, so when I was a child, you would break out the 2/4s, which meant that you had to have at least one case of 24, maybe two, but we were a low budget film at the time, and we knew that there was a new brew called Moosehead, and so our production manager got in touch with their sales manager and said, if you give us 2 cases, or 3 or 4 per day, we will put your Moosehead logo in the bar behind Hap, and on Mabel's table at 24, and in various and sundry other places, and even I believe you broke out a can as you were getting pissed off at.
Yeah, when you walk out the door.
That's right. So we broke Moosehead into America, because after that film, everybody, you know, I mean, that was a killer beer. Okay, that's it.
If anybody knows anyone at Moosehead, tell them they missed out on sponsoring this event.
There's one thing that I was always fascinated by in the making of this movie is when we all arrived on the set in Nova Scotia and we received our scripts. First of all, it was originally called The Secret.
Yeah.
And then it got changed to My Bloody Valentine. But
Well, it was always called My Bloody Valentine, but we didn't want to give away what the
Oh, the
movie was
secret.
about.
Oh.
So that was the secret.
and the interesting thing was that when we received our scripts, the last 10 pages of the script was missing out of everybody's scripts. We didn't know who the killer was, which I think was such a great idea, because it made it made us be more honest with our characters, as opposed to if they say, well, I know I'm the killer, so, and that would maybe change organically how you might play a scene or something, because you know. So we didn't know, and I never really got an answer, but was there ever another killer? Like, did you guys was Axel always the killer?
Axel was always the killer.
He was always the killer.
I mean, look at him. Stand up, Neil.
This is a killer.
And the only other thing I want to say is, you know that shower scene before the guys run out to drive to town? That shower scene, that as George alluded to, there was no electricity in this place, and there was no hot water. It was just frickin' freezing November water coming out of those pipes, and George blew a smoke machine to make it
look like steam.
But I gotta tell you, when he says action and you get underneath that thing, it's hyperventilation time. It was amazing how cold that water was.
Yeah, the shrinkage was amazing.
it looked like it was hot, but it wasn't hot.
Movie magic.
I know, the water was so cold the soap wouldn't suds.
We got another one out there? Anybody? You right there.
When you guys were making the movie, did you think it would become so popular and like stay so popular 42 years later?
No. No.
I'm just glad to get a job.
Yeah. No, I mean, we made the movie, we all learned a great deal. All of us ended up with a pretty good career afterwards. Never expected it. And I mean, I think I can speak for all of us that we're all astonished, actually, that it gains in popularity. It gains in popularity. It gains fans. I mean, the fact that, you know, I think over half this audience wasn't born when we made this movie, and probably half of that audience is half the age of the others. So, you know.
We're like classical music, George. We're just gonna go on forever.
That's exactly it. Well, you know, I don't know what it is, but I think it's a combination of the atmosphere, it's a combination of the characters, definitely the play of the actors, and the fact that it's a slasher, but it's also like a love triangle, and it's also a murder whodunit in a way.
And a Western.
And a Western. You know, and it's funny. And it's got some very funny moments in it. And I think that
You're
is,
allowed to laugh.
you know, I think that's the combination of all those things, you know, that when John Dunning, the producer, and I were talking about it, and John Baird, the writer, and I, and John Dunning, the producer, were talking about it, John Dunning sort of said, you know, I also want it to be a little like an Agatha Christie, 10 Little Indians kind of thing, you know. So that's what we have, you know, is that at first we think it's Harry Warden, then we realize it's not Harry Warden, then we don't know who it is, then we put in a bunch of MacGuffins, like the way John lifts Cynthia's head, that's what the killer does. So there's all these little hints of saying, well, it could be him, it could be him, it could be him. And yes, Axel every now and then is a bit of a quick change artist, but the reality is we spent a lot of time trying to work out the logic where there's a probability, because he always disappears for a reason, and he always appears in a way that you don't feel like he just went behind the curtains to kill somebody. So, you know, so I think all of that is probably the reason why it still works to this day.
Yeah, totally. You with the red sleeve.
Alright, first, I think the smoke machine with the cold water idea is like super great. I'm totally writing that down for if I ever get in that hyper-specific situation. And was there ever the idea to keep part of the flashback where there's Axel as a child in that scene where his father gets murdered? Like, did you ever want to throw out the idea to the audience, like, hey, you know what, maybe they'll be thinking along the way that one of these people could be the murderer, or did you want it to just come more surprising through the end?
I don't think we ever thought of it any other way. You know, especially in those days, you know, you got a script, you shot the script the way it was written, and you edited it the way it was written, and if it worked, then you didn't even think about that. You know, so no, it was always, you know, but it's an interesting idea. You know,
Next movie.
I would do it now.
And
And use hot water, the actors will love you for it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It'll be my next contract.
Just don't go to Cape Breton.
What's your favorite kill? Can I answer that one?
Yes.
Tom, would you stand up, please? So, Tom, this is Tom Kovacs. Your girlfriend's name was? Harriet. And Harriet, you went down into that little room called the machine room. And then George took great pains to shoot a scene in which you see the miner with a large, well, you saw it, a large spike, and he's behind the two of them, yes? It's called an auger. And then you see him pierce Mike's back, and Mike goes, oh! And Harriet goes, ah. And the miner goes, ugh. And Mike goes, oh. And Harriet goes, oh. And then the miner goes, ah. And together, at the same time, because that's the way it should be, they both go, ah. And they die. That was my favorite kill, and that's one of the 3.5 minutes that's missing in this
Yeah.
movie.
Oh, you forgot the fact that as Mike gets the first little poke, he starts bleeding from the mouth.
I didn't want to talk about that.
Harriet feels that little poke Mike just got is not necessarily because he's getting penetrated. So she kind of opens her mouth and her eyes and goes, ah. And so Mike offers her a great deal of blood.
It's kind of
So she starts kind of gagging on the blood. Mike gets another poke. More blood comes out. That was the one scene that the MPAA told us right off the top. It doesn't matter how many frames you cut out, this scene will never be shown on screens in the United States of America. They had a real serious problem with, and it was really tender sex we did on that one. It really was gentle, tender, of these two virgins discovering each other. And
You can read about it in the book.
oh yeah. The book has a long passage on that.
It's funny, it's kind of ironic that, like, by making, like, one of the dirtiest horror deaths, you almost ended up putting yourself in a bunch of porno theaters.
Yeah.
Because that was the one that painted the target, wasn't it?
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
the big kill.
yeah.
I'm particularly proud of the fact that back in 1981, John was promoting safe sex.
Yes. Well, we all did that. Yeah, exactly.
So we're gonna finish things up, but the last thing I just wanted to quickly talk about was just, you know, not only the legacy of My Bloody Valentine, but just like either what you want to see happen with it or where you want to see it go next, of like with all of, you know, this that's been happening over the last few years, of like, you know, there can always be more. So is there anything else you want to do with it?
I've always felt like making a sequel, but you know, that is so difficult because Paramount owns some rights, Lionsgate owns some rights. Every now and then it looks like we may be able to do it, then we can't do it. You know, there's that old expression my grandpa used to use, that it's up and down like a bride's nightie. And, you know, so obviously my dream is to do a sequel where I would still be casting all these wonderful people in it, and the ones who are dead, I would cast them still the same actor as the brother or the sister of the ones who died, and create something very, very touching about these people who are mourning the loss after all these years of their dearest friends and family, and shit starts happening again.
Nice. And shoot it in Cape Breton, right?
Absolutely. My dream is to shoot it in Sydney Mines.
Amazing.
before we go, how about a round of applause for our dearly departed friends,
Yes.
Alf, Paul, and Pete.
It was very, very good. Thank you.
It was so much fun to work with.
So we're gonna close things out, but you can come and meet everyone and buy things and hang out and talk for a bit, and then we'll kick you out. But thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Always good to be home.